All right. Ooh, it's cold. All right, this isn't anything important. I'm bored. And I have things that I can read. Yes, it's going to be story time. Let's see here. All right. I can. I'll. Since you're the only one here, King, I'll give you a choice. You can. You can choose from Education of Kathleen, Murphy's Law, Wifely Duties, and Writer's Block. Hi, Tracy. Yes, story time. A live read. Writer's Block? Okay. I think you're going to like this one. Let me get it set up so I'm not blocking the chat. See, this is why I need a two-monitor laptop, so I can do more than one thing on one side. All right. This is a story I wrote myself, so be prepared. Writer's Block by name redacted, because I'm not going to tell you. Hold on a second. It's taking a bit to load, and I don't like that. All right, here we go. Eric Stater cracked his knuckles as he sat down in front of his old-fashioned typewriter. He was getting close to the deadline that his publisher had placed on his newest manuscript. Eric wasn't a sci-fi writer or even an action writer. He was a novelist that specialized in real-life dramas. He looked at the newspaper every day for inspiration, and he was just starting to complete his newest work. Most people would call Eric Stater a purist, but he just liked writing in the genre that he was most comfortable in. The first few clicks of the old-fashioned typewriter sounded and announced to his whole house that he was working and not to be disturbed. It wasn't that hard for Eric to get distracted, and he hated that about himself. So he moved himself and the rest of his family out into the rural area of Carson City. It wasn't that hard for the fact that Carson City may have been the state capital of Nevada, yet housed only about 45,000 people. No matter where you went, it could be considered rural, aside from the area with the casinos. Halfway into the first paragraph, Eric's cell phone rang. It was his wife's ringtone, and he desperately wanted to keep writing. But, knowing she would be upset if he didn't answer, he picked it up and hit the button to connect the call. Hello? Eric, his wife asked. Who else would it be? He answered back. We hit some traffic on the way home. The boys and I should be home a little late. Okay, no problem. I'm just in my study. Okay, I love you, Eric, she said cheerfully. Love you too, dear. Eric hung up the phone. He started typing away again, as the ideas for his newest novel flew from his mind. Anyone watching him would have gasped at the speed his fingers moved. Many had wondered how he could type so fast and such, and on such an old machine without destroying it. He would always laugh it off and muse about how the old typewriters were made better than any of these new laptops or personal computers that he had been forced into getting. One laptop in particular, that the publisher had obtained for him, broke within a week. Eric's keystrokes were so rough on the new laptop that he just started popping off the key. They just started popping off the keyboard like jumping beans. His publisher tried to get him a PC after that, and that particular machine met a worse fate. When Eric would get into a writing zone, he could write for days without stopping for sleep, and sometimes even food. This particular computer had the unfortunate task of being the target of that abuse. Eric had started on a Friday at around 10 in the morning and didn't finish his session until well into Tuesday night. The hard drive gave out before Eric did. The computer froze and there was actual smoke that started to pour from one of the vents. The whole manuscript was lost. Since Eric hadn't taken any time to save, that had been the fifth computer Eric had broken, and it seemed to be the last straw for his publisher because they refused to buy him a new one. That was fine by Eric's account. He didn't like typing on the stupid things anyway. The door downstairs finally opened, and he heard the sound of his rambunctious twin boys. And the sounds of his rambunctious twin boys could be heard arguing about something. He merely chuckled to himself and continued writing. He heard his wife come up the stairs of their spacious two-story, four-bedroom home and knocked on his door. He didn't answer, but then again she knew he wouldn't. His wife walked up behind him and leaned down to look at the latest page. "Looks like another drama that will capture the hearts of the masses, my dear," she said sweetly. Once again, Eric didn't answer. His family knew how he got when he was in his own. The world could crumble down around him and he would never even know. Eric was focused on his newest romantic drama. It was a tearjerker, to say the least. The basis was simple. A man loses his family in a horrific car crash, and he is the only one to survive. The novel was about how he learned to cope with the loss and even find new love in a new city. Eric was going to throw a huge twist in the end of the novel, though, one that would throw his normal readers for a loop. Not only would the new woman his main character was head over heels about be related to his deceased wife, but it would be her twin sister that no one but her mother knew about. He smirked to himself at the realization of this twist would upset a few people. It wasn't his normal endings, where the world seemed to right itself once again in his characters' lives. Instead, it would throw open a whole new world of questions that he planned to answer in a sequel, something else he had never done before. Maternal twins seemed more believable. No one would buy that she had to have reconstructive surgery, he said to himself. Eric had stopped typing for a few minutes and noticed the house seemed quiet. That wasn't too strange. His wife could have taken the boys outside to burn off the perpetual energy they always seemed to have. So, given that he had the house to himself again, Eric started to type out more pages to his newest manuscript. He was like a machine, barely hearing anything around him until his eyes blurred with weariness. He didn't know how long he had been writing, but it was suddenly dark out. He stretched and decided he would take a quick break to get something to eat and rest his eyes. The house was dark as he walked downstairs, but again, this was normal. He looked at the clock above the window in his kitchen to see that it was well past midnight. He opened the fridge to see what he had waiting for him and found a small turkey sandwich waiting with all the extra mayonnaise, ketchup, lettuce, tomato, even some bacon to add the already unhealthy meal. The only thing it was really missing was a bit of mustard. He looked around the fridge to find that they were all out, so he closed the door and wrote it on a small notepad that was on the refrigerator door. He moved to his pantry and popped open the door and looked inside for some chips that would go great with his sandwich. As soon as he popped his head inside, he wished he hadn't. Something had gone bad, and he could smell the mold eating away at whatever it was. He would go through the pantry and find out what it was after he was done writing. He grabbed his favorite bag of chips and walked back into his study. After eating the sandwich and enjoying it fully, he cracked his knuckles once again and began to write. As he was just about to make his main character attempt suicide, something flashed out of the corner of his eye. He looked over his shoulder only to see nothing. Eric shook it off as just being tired and went back to the scene he was trying to finish. Just as he was about to finish the second page of the scene, there was a second burst of light from the opposite side of the room. This time, though, it looked like someone had held up a flashlight to his eye rather than a quick burst like before. He could swear the light had taken form. Once again, shaking it off, thinking how crazy it sounded, he continued to write. It was about an hour later that the flash returned, and this time Eric was sure he saw it move. Not just move, but walk toward him. He snapped his head around to catch a glimpse of what it was, but only saw an empty room. "You're losing it, Eric," he said to himself as he looked back to his typewriter. "It's just your eyes telling you that they're tired." The voice in the back of his head was desperately trying to tell him he needed to finish, that a break was the wrong thing to take. His deadline was in 2 days, and he still had 30 or so pages that he had to write. It wasn't like him to be late, and his publisher actually banked on him for that reason. He was reliable and responsible. Eric didn't want to listen to that tiny voice, but he did anyway. So he began to type away again. He didn't know how long he had been typing this time, but he saw the flash more clearly. He was even able to tell where it came from. Eric whirled around in his chair and looked at the source. It was an electrical outlet. He was certain that he had seen something come from the electrical outlet on the wall. It was large, about the size of an adult, and shining like it was full of electricity. "Who's there?" he heard himself asking the empty room. After a few seconds of silence, Eric shook his head and returned to his typewriter. He normally didn't like reviewing his work until he was finished. With the older machine, it was easier to edit his work that way. He could continue to pound even harder on the keys, making sure he was concentrating on his manuscript. He swore to himself that he would ignore the flashes of light this time. He wouldn't get distracted by tricks his eyes were playing on him. He had to work, and he had to get it done. And he would do it because this is what he needed to do. Sure enough, only after a few sentences, the flash came again. This time, Eric ignored it just like he had promised himself he would. He continued to type as fast as his fingers would allow him to. The spark of light happened again and again, as if trying to get his attention. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Eric allowed himself to be distracted by the continual flashes of light. Sorry, I thought someone was coming, guys. Where was I? Sure enough, only after a few sentences, the flashes came again. This time, Eric ignored it just like he had promised himself he would. He continued to type as fast as his fingers would allow him to. The spark of light happened again and again, as if trying to get his attention. No, I'm sure it's not from Code Lyoko. I've actually never seen it. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Eric allowed himself to be distracted by the continual flashes of light. He turned at each flash trying to see what it was. Maybe a short in the wiring, or even a faulty plug. It would be something that he would have to call an electrician for in the morning. The flashing lights seemed to be teasing Eric as they disappeared every time he turned his head. It was frustrating more than anything, and it was starting to make Eric feel as if he was cracking up. He had stopped pounding on his typewriter and turned his chair to face the electrical outlet. He stared at the small plug for what seemed like hours. He was waiting for something, anything to spark again, to show him that he wasn't crazy. After more than a few hours of staring, Eric concluded that he was indeed going a little crazy. He had just been staring at a plug for a better part of 4 hours when he could have been writing. Nothing had happened in the time that he had been staring at the tiny plug, and he figured nothing would happen. He decided he would talk to his wife first thing in the morning, tell her what was going on. She was always good at reassuring him that he wasn't cracking up when he would pull his all-nighters. Eric slowly turned in his chair back towards the keyboard, his eyes still watching the outlet as if something was going to happen. When nothing did, he settled back in and placed his hand on the keys of his old-time machine. He blinked a few times and tried to remember where he had left off. Not really wanting to rereading his page he had just finished. He shook his head and sighed, reaching for his last page and picked it up. As he brought it closer to his eyes, the flash of light seemed to light up the room. It made Eric squint and put the page down. He turned towards the light. It hadn't vanished this time, and shielded his eyes. The light was bright and blinding, but it was so fantastic he couldn't turn away. He felt like he needed to continue to stare at its glory. The light faded and he blinked a few more times. It had taken shape, a solid form, and it was one he couldn't believe. It was the form of his wife. Two smaller flashes exploded from the outlet, and he saw his two twin boys standing next to their mother. Eric slapped his hand on his forehead. This was impossible. He was definitely going bonkers now. His mind had become so tired he was hallucinating. He had never had this happen before, and the feeling he was getting was simply that he didn't want it to happen again. I'll close my eyes and they'll be gone. This is just a hallucination, a trick my mind is playing on me, Eric thought as he shut his eyes tightly. He wished he could open them and see the empty room again, hear the silence of his home and be reassured that he wasn't going completely crazy. Yet when he opened his eyes, they were still there, standing in front of him and staring at him as if wanting to say something. His wife looked as if she was speaking to him, but he couldn't quite hear what she was saying. She would move her mouth and then point to the typewriter, and each time she seemed to get more and more agitated. It had happened before, not the hallucinations, but the argument about his typewriter and the fact that he would shut everything out when he would begin to write. I can't hear you, he dared to say to the silent form of his wife. She just motioned faster and seemed to be getting angry at him for not understanding. With a final huff, his wife pointed to the stack of pages that were piled next to his typewriter. She seemed to scream something that he couldn't hear and then pointed at him. Eric looked from his wife to the pages, then back. You want me to look at my manuscript? It's Ghost all over again. Call the Ghostbusters. The specter of his wife nodded and seemed to calm down. Eric took a deep breath and frowned as he picked up the top page and turned it over so he could see it. His eyes widened in horror as he saw what he had written. It wasn't his novel. It wasn't anything he had ever remembered typing. He turned the next page over and saw the same thing. It was on every page he had written since he had started. He was breathing hard as he threw the papers aside and stood up. No, it's not true, he shouted as he stormed downstairs. Eric threw open the refrigerator door and gasped as he saw that there was nothing inside but packages of turkey. He closed the door and looked up to see his notepad sitting on the door was covered with Need mustard all over it. He pulled open the pantry and pulled the small cord that turned the light on and saw stacks upon stacks of bread, some half finished, others green and molding, and some brand new. Eric felt his heart pounding in his chest as he almost leapt up to the stairs to the master bedroom, nearly breaking the door down as he pushed it open. He saw what he had been dreading the whole time. The room was vacant, covered in cobwebs, and looked as if it hadn't been lived in for a very long time. He didn't want to, but he had to see his boy's room. He slowly crept down the hall of his home, suddenly feeling as if it was alien to him in every way. He pushed open the door to his children's shared room and felt the tears well up in his eyes. It was just as vacant as the master bedroom. He moved back into his study and found the three ghost-like forms of his family still standing there. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to feel. All he could do was slump down into his chair and look at the scattered papers all along the floor, each page reading the same thing over and over again. My name is Eric Stater, and I killed my family. I buried them in the backyard. May God have mercy on my soul. I died for my work, and so did they. Eric sat back and looked up. His cry of anguish echoed in the silent house as he saw the dangling feet accompanied by a body, his body, hanging from the ceiling. The end. Well, what did you guys think? I wrote that actually a very long time ago. It's the end. I just read 8 pages. Thank you, Tracy. It's called a twist ending, King. Thought you would have caught that. You want more. All right, let's see what I got here. All right, Tracy, you are here next. You can choose from Wifely Duties, Murphy's Law, The Education of Kathleen, or Devil's Night. Murphy's Law. All right. Now, don't be too cruel about these. I wrote these a long time ago. Go for the cheap, boring titles. If they sound familiar, I don't know from where, but yes, these are mine. All right, Murphy's Law. This one is a little bit longer than the last one, so. All right. Just alongside the 10. I'm not that fucking old, Pheromone. Just think about it. You go through life eating the same food, working the same job, having the same sex. You feel dead inside. What if one day you just suddenly woke up? I did. My life wasn't anything great. 2 kids, a wife, mortgage, mediocre job that I hated going to, and a family car that made me look more like a dork than the cool guy I remembered in college. I had so many dreams when I was younger, so many ambitions that I thought I could accomplish. I went to college like I was supposed to, left almost a month after high school let out, moved to a new city, and started a new life. Yes, the emo phase. I buried myself in studies, homework, extracurricular activities. I lived the life of the normal, everyday college student. I had friends then. I was always the life of the party, and no one could ever say that I wasn't cool or hip. I was the college guy that always went home with a different girl every night, sometimes more than one. Hi, Sparky. Go to sleep. Then I graduated. A master's in graphic design and 3 job offers that would set me up for life. My career was well underway. Then the crash came. Not a car crash, no, that would have been a blessing. The company I worked for was caught up in some type of legal scam. They were doing something with copyright laws and things like that. The whole company went down the tubes, and our CEO was arrested along with each member of the board. I was lucky I was the only peon then. I was lucky I was only a peon then, someone who came to work every day, and I did what I was told. I wasn't charged, but I did have a lot of my designs pulled off the market, and that put a huge hurting on my life. Thank you, King. Aside from all this happening, I had met the girl of my dreams, and she thought I was just as cool as I was in college. It helped that she was still in college and thought all the stupid stuff I had done those few years ago was still awesome. We got careless, and then she ended up pregnant. Unplanned and unwanted by me. My life was good the way it was, and I didn't want it to change. She was going to keep it whether I wanted her to or not. As you can see, this was the beginning of my downfall. So we got married, and I became a dad soon after. Just as my first daughter was being born, kablam! The shit hits the fan with my company, and I'm out of a job. My college student wife couldn't drop out. I didn't want her to. So I did what any normal human being would do. Went to the other two companies that had wanted me before. Apparently, the fallout from the scandal had affected me in ways I hadn't foreseen. I hadn't been a part of the scandal, or even in the planning of it, yet I was labeled with the title of a high risk employee. I got turned down by each and every one. Every designer job I applied for was turned down. My work had been pulled from use, and that was problem one. I was part of a company that had stolen mass amounts of money and even ideas from its clients. That was problem two. Problem three was I was desperate, and they could smell it on me as soon as I walked into the interview room. Three strikes, and I'm out, apparently. So I took a full time job at a local restaurant being a waiter, and the three of us seemed to have gotten along just fine. Tips were good, and I'd gotten to be good enough to be requested to be by regular customers that liked to tip big. That's when my now out of college and non working wife dropped a bomb on me. She was pregnant again, at least by 2 months. The moderate two-bedroom apartment was suddenly not big enough for all of us. Not only that, but my full time job was not bringing in enough income for us any longer. I'm in the middle of a story, Lo Fi. Fine. I'll put pause on this. Type 1 in the chat if you want me to read Lo Fi's fanfic. All right, I will put this on hold. I didn't really get too far into the story of Fermions, don't worry. Oh my god. Actually, Lo-Fi, you need to send me the fanfic again. I deleted it when you told me you didn't want to read it anymore. So just send me the file on Discord again. You didn't want me to read it, so I deleted it. Don't give me that. I'm warning you now, there are names in it that I cannot pronounce. Isn't still. Well, if you don't have it on your phone, I can't read it. I don't have it. All right, I'll continue here. So I did what any responsible parent. No, I don't delete fan art if I don't use it. Going to continue. So I did what any responsible parent and husband would do. I got a second job. I went from working 40 hours a week to almost 80. I wasn't sleeping well and forget about relaxing. But I did it. I did it for 5 years. No vacation, no relaxation, no downtime. No me time, to be more exact. My wife was now a full time mom with 2 kids. Her college degree was nothing more than a piece of paper on the wall. We started to struggle more as prices for everything went up and my 2 daughters got older. So here I was, a family man with a degree in graphic design and someone who should be making at least 6 figures a year, working 2 full-time jobs and living in a 3-bedroom apartment. That changed quickly as space became too cramped. We needed a house, or so I was told. So we got a house, a nice spacious 4-bedroom house that could fit the 4 of us and all of our stuff. Thought you said you didn't have it on your phone, son of a bitch. All right. So apparently she did have it. I will even got a catchy punny title. All right. So do you want to know what it's called? It's called Catching a Cold. As in my other name for my other channel. God. I should have Lo-Fi come on here and read this. All right. Chapter 1. Ask me a question. And spelt exactly like you think it's spelt. Is there any more content from Unsleeved Media coming out? I think I only did 2 things on Unsleeved Media. If you're talking about Magigeddon, I do have one more video coming out, but it's not going to be coming out for a while. All right. Ask me a question. It was a beautiful spring day on the planet of Exia. Axeia. I'm hoping I'm saying that one right. Kelpie was out doing what she did best, murdering everything with quick wit and sharp axes. God. Damn, it's hot today, she said to herself while fastening her Space Dane axe to her skirt. It wasn't hot. It was a good minus 45 degrees Celsius, which is well below absolute zero. God damn it. But Kelpie didn't want to complain because as her mom used to tell her, if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't hurt. So a little thing like as frostbite was hardly worth even noticing. And she even knew that if she did indeed complain, she would be sent off planet on one of those long spaceships. Ah, well, at least I got enough raiding done today to earn my second scout spade. 2 villages destroyed in under an hour. She smiled to no one in particular. She did a whirl and did the peace sign. I'm not saying that next line. Um, oh my god. So kawaii. A voice called behind her. She knew the voice. It was none other than the neighbor kid. Smenkmag. I'm gonna put this name in the fucking chat so you guys can try and pronounce it. Oh my god. That name. And he was truly a massive cunt, and no one really liked him. Oh god. What do you want, Smenkmag? Kelpie said, exasperated. Nothing. Nothing much. Just checking out the mad keks. Heck, heck, heck. Smenkmag. I know who this is about. Oh, Smeckmag laughed. Go away, Finkel's cunt. You are so fucking annoying. I will murder you like the village murdered your entire tribe last year, Kelpie said, unfastening her space dane axe of her space dane off a space dane ass, which bounced slightly from the touch. God. Oh no, you are oppressing me, Finkel's cunt said, unfastening his great big book of magic. No, you put that book down, Finkel's cunt. I will murder you more than you could realistically die. Oh my god. Kelpie yelled, slowly turning her sentence into a terrifying roar of rage and anger and rage. Pepe Pock, you liked vagine, now you like cock. oh my, oh my god. Finkel's cunt screamed while twirling his chubby tits towards Kelpie. He was truly a disgusting individual. I'm not even done with the first page yet. A beam of concentrated hetero magic. Oh my god. Concentrated hetero magic. I never thought that sentence would come out of my mouth. Zoomed towards Kelpie, but before it hit, with a mighty whore, she threw the space dane axe high into the air. and was the, and was then hit right on the left tit, which bounced mightily because it was indeed a good size. Not too big, but not small. A good, firm handful with a little heft to spare, with perfectly placed nipples. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. Anyway, back to the story. Oh my god. No, the laughter is not part of the story. I'm sorry. I can't. I don't know how much more of this I can read. There's 3 more pages. No, but she actually wrote. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. Anyways, back to the story. Oof! Cappy exclaimed when her delightful tush hit the ground. Jake fucking smander a dig din fetty idiot. I don't even know what the fuck I just said. I, I can't pronounce these words. Yeah, I'm gonna here. This is I cannot pronounce most of these. After all that is said, Den her planet, she exclaimed loudly in the ancient languages of space Danish. Oh, that's why I can't pronounce it. Ha ha, I got you now. Just you wait, Kelpie. In a matter of minutes, you'll be attracted to me by force because you killed my entire tribe. I am the last male on the planet. Feagle's cunt laughed and danced on the spot, hooting and tooting into the air. Well, Finkel's cunt, I'm not so sure about that, Kelpie said, slowly rising up and dusting the fresh wet snow off of her. Now, off of her now wet and glistening hiney. What? What do you mean, Kelpie? What did you do? Finkel's cunt said. Oh, you will know in with like 12 N's attached to it. Kelpie said. In what? Asked Finkel's cunt. Shh. Kelpie said for but a second, quickly pressing a finger to her slightly bluish because of the cold lips. In what? Fuck's sake, Kelpie, give yourself over to Finkel's cunt began. Now, Kelpie yelled. What? Finkel's cut managed to say before the Space Dane axe hit him in the perfect loop, right where his male genitalia was, nearly splitting his downstairs region in twain in a rainbow of blood and a bit of guts and mud and mostly blood. A lot of blood. Did you know that there are large veins down there? So you can imagine the amounts of blood. this this is I'm on to the beginning of page 2, yes. Ow. That's the best thing I said. Finkel's cunt yelled, grabbing his bleeding chopped sausage. Lo-fi, I am not. Lo-fi, I'm not gonna lie. This is still better than 50 Shades of Grey. That will fucking teach you. Now you aren't a man either. Go die in the forest, you fecking spastic. Kelpie laughed, walking towards him with her smaller yet equally deadly woodsman axe in her left hand. Finkel's cunt ran. He ran as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast because he was clearly dying of quite severe blood loss. I don't know if I could take 2 more chapters. Kelpie picked up her Space Dane axe, but caught herself staring too long at the handle, feeling a strange itch in the nether regions. Huh, that's strange, she said, but thought nothing of it. Oh my. Oh god. That's the end of chapter 1. Do you guys want me to go on? I don't know if I'll be able to finish. It's only 2 more pages, but, well, a page and a half. Put one in the chat if you want me to finish. It's not a 1, Darkside. Must do a 1. You have to follow the orders. Oh, I don't know if you guys are saying yes because you're enjoying it or just enjoying me laughing. All right. I don't know what the 6 means, Greg. Is it 6 ones? Thank you, Tracy. All right. Chapter 2. Transformication. Okay. It had been a couple of days since the encounter with Finkelskant, who had been found alive with his groinal area buried in deep snow to freeze the bleeding shut. Kelpie's initial thought was, damn, wish he had died, but she was happy to know he was summarily executed for his crime against humor. How's it going, narrative? All hail Blue Whale. Kelpie had never quite lost the twitch in the snitch after the fight. Sorry. Transfornication. Okay. She never quite lost the twitch in the snitch after the fight and had found herself more than once bringing wax candles into the bedroom. Kelpie was shocked and didn't know what to do. She had always loved a piece of minge in the morning, but lately she. But lately she has craved less pie and more deep oil drilling. Oh my god. Lo-fi, you have a way with fucking words. Excuse me. I know it's against the laws, but I have to go ask the elder, Kelpie thought to herself. She ran out the door of her longhouse and towards the fortress of the elder. She ran past the guards and briefly noticed that instead of craving a piece of them, she got annoyed that their outfit was slightly similar to hers. What a bunch of whores. Elder, help me. I don't crave vagina as much anymore. She yelled, more like screamed. Uh, oh my god. now, now, girl, sit down and tell me what happened. When did this start? The elder asked in raspy, cougarish voice. Kelpie explained the whole fight, what Finkel's cunt had done, what had hit her, and what she had felt afterwards. This is the dumbest thing I've ever narrated, the narrator said aloud. It is. It is. This is very fourth wall breaking. Oh, I see. Terrible indeed. Did you bring this magic book? For I think I know what has happened, the elder rasped. Pff, no, you know I only listen to audiobooks as of late. It's so much easier to bathe, work, and fuck, yet still enjoying a delightful, fantastical romp through a good book. Buy an Audible membership for the one free book a month. Kelpie sit. This show is not sponsored by Audible. This was all written down. Oh my god. Oh, God. Ray, I'm still up. I work graveyard. This is the end half of my night. Oh, I see. Well, dear girl, what you were hit by was penis magic. A magic that turns anyone hit into a Venus craving lunatic. The elder said and continued, and since you've already a blistering maniac, you just want a good dick fillet. Oh my god. Oh no, Kelpie said, imagining it and unintentionally licking her lips. What do I do, elder? Kelpie continued. The elder's response was far from satisfying. Well, as you know, my dear girl, no one on Axia is allowed to like the wampa fruit. Like the wampa fruit? It is forbidden. But do not fret, for you are not the first of this village of sisters to crave a good cockening. Like your sisters before you, you shall travel to the stars atop a mighty space longship, also called a terraformer. Terror, as in scary. Copyright lo-fi. Don't fucking steal that name. Seriously, I'll murder you. It's fucking important for my legit book I'm writing. Consider this a tiny taste. And on the terraformer, you shall go to another world inhabited by both or more genders, invade, raid, pillage, and rape, and set up a place for our people to continue. For this is how our lives work, and this is what we do. We turn a planet into eternal winter and womanhood, and use the hetero warriors to conquer and give birth to the next generation of almighty Axias. That is a long O. Oh, shit. That doesn't sound half bad. Do I get a crew? Do I get a command? What happened? Kelpie said, excited, ready to raid. Indeed you do. Indeed you do. Now, go now and assemble a crew of 5 in total, for that is the number needed, the elder said. Kelpie thanked the elder, put her furry hat on, and ran out the door. Off to find a crew. Who should I go for? Who should I catch? Who would make good crew members, but more importantly, who can fill my snatch? She sang while skipping through the snow. And that's the end of chapter 2. The preview for chapter 3 is just the name of the chapter, which is Hardwood Deep Rooting. I am reading from the book of lo-fi. You know what? Still a better love story than Twilight. Oh my god. You know what? I don't know anything I have that is going to top that. I have nothing. I have absolutely nothing. Oh my god. Well, what did you guys think? So much better than Twilight. Uh, Turd, no, it's not read in a Cockney accent. It's read in a lo-fi accent. More. Great. Oh, later this year, huh, lo-fi? Sorry about that, Fermion. Oh, I'm not touching WhatsApp or fanfic.com. Those places frighten me. Oh, you could tell tell this story to your people. Good idea. I think just reading this story to someone could be considered torture, a form of torture, because laughing too hard is just. Can I read it again without laughing? Probably fucking not. The no laughing challenge. You read it without laughing, and then we'll see about the no laughing challenge. Okay. Did you want me to go back to the story I was reading before, or do you want me to read something else? Will it tray you? Don't ask me. I'm not the one that wrote it. What's your idea, Moondoggy? Yeah, let me bring up some of the other stories. I have a good one. Yeah, you guys want a good one? See you later, Lo-Fi. All right. Oh God, this one's longer than the last one. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read one that's called "The Education of Kathleen." It's a little long, but I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Most of my Discord would probably enjoy it. Ray, this stream was about me reading some of the stories that I wrote. And then it was requested that I read Lo-Fi's fan fiction, and that's what that was. All right. All right, give me just a second here. All right, Education of Kathleen. God, I don't even know when I wrote this one. I don't have any of my stories aren't necessarily funny. When I wrote these, I was in a horror type, suspense type mood. I don't really have any actual comedies. I don't actually write good comedy, um, which is why I don't use a script when I do my videos. I flow with comedy much better than I do write it down. I can tell you a funny story though about the one time I did seriously try to write comedy. Uh, make make a backstory shorter than it normally is, and it's basically okay. So my mom and dad got divorced when I was 14. It's fine. They got divorced when I was 14. This is a story of where I bombed, so you guys might get an entertainment out of it. They got remarried when I was 26, 25, 25. So my brother and I got to be the best men. Oh, give me just a second here, folks. I'll be right back. I'm trying to stay warm and stuff like that. There we go. Oh. No, I'm here. I'm here. Okay, so I was one of the best men, and we had a reception, and of course, the best man is supposed to make a toast. So my brother went first, made just a few quips. Everybody laughed, and I was like, "Oh, I wrote mine down." And with writing it down, I figured, "Oh, I had time. I made some jokes in there." Hold on a second. Sorry, I am still at work, so when things happen, I have to take care of them. Maybe I'll read that after I'm done with this if you guys want me to keep going. Like I said, this one's long. Okay. So I write my speech down. I did the stupid thing that everyone does in movies. You say pause for laughter. I actually wrote that down. I so fucking cliche because I thought I had made a good joke. I read my speech. Dead silence for the entire thing. I gave up halfway through and just threw some normal, I'm glad my mom and dad are back together type things and sat down very, very embarrassed. So I don't write comedy well, but I can speak comedy pretty well. Glad I could entertain you, Gabe. Okay, so education of Kathleen. Kathleen Degas was your typical, normal, everyday wife. At least that's the image she portrayed outwardly to everyone who saw her. The people that were lucky enough to know Kathleen by her nickname Kitty. I want to put an aside. This story is based on true events. Saw her as a fun-loving free spirit. Her small stature and even smaller frame gave her an appearance that was meant to be underestimated. It was a mistake quite a few men made, and each one had been surprised by this tiny dynamo. She married young, and by luck of the draw, it just happened to be her best friend that she had been friends with since she was a child. The story was one that you've always read about in books or saw in movies. They were friends first and lovers second. They were always with someone else while the other one was alone and vice versa. After a pretty bad breakup that Kitty had, she confided in Mitch, her soon to be husband, and the two finally saw the attraction they had to each other. The two were married after a year-long courtship and took pride in the fact that everyone saw how happy they were. A year after their nuptials, the two welcomed a baby girl into the world, making their family complete. They named her Riley, and seemed on the outside to be a sturdy, loving, and happy couple. A fairy tale come true. But this is just the beginning of our story, isn't it? I can't very well tell you the end of the story first before going through everything else, now can I? Kathleen had been happy with her family. She had been happy with her faithful husband, happy with her innocent daughter, happy with her productive working life, and just plain happy with her existence in general. The funny thing about the human condition, and even more interesting about the human being itself, is that something as simple as a chance encounter can throw a monkey wrench into the works of a perfect life. Her working life was about to become the loose cog in her clockwork world, the monkey wrench that was going to teach her a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. This is also where I come in. Not so much to say that I have a personal involvement in this situation, but more of the catalyst to the events that were about to transpire. You see, my name is Matthias Graymore, and for as long as I can remember, I have been able to read people with an uncanny accuracy. Believe it or not, it is only by mere chance that I came across Kitty in her work life. Kathleen Degas was in no way a frumpy housewife. More to the contrary. Kitty was the kind of beautiful that made men stare. She could turn heads and stop traffic. Her looks would be described as the beauty that could send ships to war just to defend her honor. Epic poems would have been written about her if she had been alive during the Renaissance. Kathleen sat at 5'4" at her tallest. With her toned body, she couldn't weigh more than 125 pounds soaking wet. Her long black hair hung down somewhere around the middle of her back and was well taken care of. Her slim figure seemed to be accentuated by the clothes she always wore. It was as if she took every chance she could to draw attention to what she considered her best feature. Most men would agree. The tight jeans and even tighter slacks that Kitty liked to wear caused most eyes to be drawn immediately downward. Not to be outdone, her lips always seemed to look kissable, and her small amount of cleavage was usually on display. Her dark brown eyes always seemed to be hiding behind a small but stylish pair of glasses, and the smile that was usually stretched over her oh so kissable lips made the total package complete. Her complete ensemble was made to cause doubt. The glasses gave her an innocent quality as well as her small size, and they did their jobs well, as no one could ever expect that this tiny woman was able to think the things she did. With Mitch unable to work because of a disease that doctors around the area had been unable to diagnose or get under control, Kitty took on the occasional occupation of working mother and began to work at a fast food establishment. The small burger joint was seated on the corner of a dead intersection. Although it was your typical burger pla- Although it was your typical burger palace, there was a down-home feel to it. The business only held a total of 7 employees, 3 cooks, 3 cashiers, and 1 supervisor. The cooks and cashiers worked enough to be able to get to know their customers pretty well, and the regulars they did have always seemed to tip a little more than was necessary to help the tight knit group along. The main income for the burger joint was from the surrounding businesses. The sec. No, he didn't butcher. The section of the road that the food establishment sat on was surrounded by auto body shops, warehouses, furniture supply stores, and other distribution warehouses. There was no structural flow to the businesses either. It seemed that they had just been scattered around for the best property usage, almost as if they had been dropped by littering businessmen who thought they would be more lucrative in a chaotic design. On the upside, there was a particular auto body shop that sat directly across from the burger joint and housed more than 20 mechanics. Each and every day, those mechanics would come in, order lunch, especially if Kitty happened to be working at the register. They were relentless, each and every one of the mechanics, when they saw that Kathleen was working. They would flirt and tease, finding any excuse to get Kitty to bend over far enough to expose her cleavage or pick something up to get a good long look at her toned and pert backside. As soon as they saw that, she not only played along, but seemed to thrive off the attention. They upped the ante, their comments becoming more and more crass and vulgar to the point of openly offering sexual favors for bigger tips. To her credit, though, Kitty remained faithful and just let the remarks roll off her demure shoulders. I would sit and watch these actions day in and day out. The young miss would soak in all the attention, all the comments, and all the offers, and just continue to smile. It was soon after I witnessed this that Kitty began to openly flirt back. She would try and induce more comments, pushing the conversation to lewd and dangerous limits. It didn't stop with the mechanics that came in either. The three male cooks that worked with her seemed to give her the same attention, and with each new day they would grow bolder, calling her into the back to start a tickle war or some prank that would allow them to put their hands on some part of her body. As strange as it was, I watched as Kathleen grew more and more open to this attention and knew exactly how to act to get it. I saw where this was leading, and with a few well placed suggestions, a person's true nature would begin to shine through. Every day, like clockwork, Mitch, Kitty's husband, would come in with their daughter. They would visit for about 15 minutes on her break, and Mitch would leave. On these little trips, Mitch would usually he had been leave with money he had been given, but on the rare occasion the couple would argue, and Mitch would leave less than pleased with his wife. They always tried to be discreet, but in a small place like the burger joint she worked in, it was almost impossible. The kicker to this whole thing was Kitty had started to believe that the disease that Mitch had was nothing more than laziness and his unwillingness to do anything but stay at home and watch television. It was a burden on Kathleen for the fact that she was the only one working, and the meager wages she was pulling in was hardly enough to keep them stable. After a particularly harsh bickering session, Mitch left in a huge huff, and Kathleen fumed for a good hour afterward, even going so far as to curse the man long after he had left. It was in the middle of this less than silent rant that the door to the establishment swung open. This drew her attention because she knew that she had to put on a smile and act as the happy cashier, even though she was fuming inside. The happy employee drew the most business and the best tips. As she looked up, her smile became genuine. It was the face she hadn't seen before, which was a rarity in the place that she worked. Every customer was regular from around the area. The breath of fresh air that was carried with the newcomer was an immediate mood booster. It was a young man around his early 20s, if not late teens. His hair was light brown and cut loose to his head, almost compared to a crew cut. His eyes were bright and seemed to have a maturity that belied his youthful appearance. His body was framed in corded muscles that were toned to fit his stature like a glove. He wasn't overly muscle-bound, but the obvious bulges in all the right places gave him a physically appealing appearance. Even with his form hidden underneath a pair of dark navy blue coveralls, he was still an impressive physical specimen. The small that blazed over his chest announced that he worked at Benny's Auto in brilliant white, red, and yellow. The two locked eyes mere seconds after they had taken a good long look at one another. It was Kitty that was first to act. Her lips creased upward, and she showed most of her teeth as she placed her best flirtatious smile on, with her cheeks turning a soft red. Seeing this gave the newcomer a sense of confidence, and nearly strutted up to the counter like a pimp in an old 70s blaxploitation film. Now, before we go any further, I feel it is necessary to explain myself and how I have come to have this information. I am not a pervert or a stalker. To put it mildly, I'm a watcher. That being you call God, I call Father. Matthias is just one of many names I have gone by since the beginning of my existence. I probably know more about you than your own mother does, and the things I know about you would make her blush. If and when I come to your story, feel free to correct me at any time. I watch the human race, and that is how I'm able to understand you so much better than most of you would care to admit. I am not your conscience, and nor would I ever want to be. I do, however, know that this story is far from over, so I will continue. You're a new face, Kitty said in an odd voice. Just started at Benny's yesterday. The deep tone of his voice sent a shiver up Kathleen's spine. My name is Kathleen, but everyone around here just calls me Kitty, she beamed. James, newest mechanic said, leaning forward on the counter a little. Kitty leaned forward as well, only her action pushed the top of her buttoned blue and white uniform downward. It exposed more than a little bit of cleavage, and it seemed that she didn't mind it in the least. The moment was lost on the young mechanic as his eyes looked down at the very exposed blouse. His eyes drank in every inch of her curvaceous flesh, and let his gaze stay there for a long time. This is the moment that Kathleen's education began. Harmless flirting and nothing more. Kitty told James all about her husband and daughter and the many visits the mechanic made. Very rarely did he have time to eat along with their conversation, but the young man knew Kitty was the kept woman. That fact seemed to be lost on him, though, as he seemed to push the line further with each visit. Um, it started slow, like all great seductions do, with comments on her appearance, or Kitty touching James's arm and softly, or making a smart remark about his butt as the mechanic left the establishment, giggling and chiding all around to the point that it was taking up more of her time than it should have. Someone that was less than observant would probably call the two good friends and leave it at that. Flirting turned to touching, a soft touch on the hand or a more drastic hug that lasted a little too long. It progressed slowly, and the pace seemed to be set by Kitty herself. It took a different turn as soon as James offered to give Kathleen a back rub after a particularly long lunch rush. The sounds that came from the young married woman were not the ones that someone should be making during a back rub, but sounded more like they were reserved for the bedroom. The rest of the burger joint could see what was going on as plain as day, but did nothing to assuage the two from continuing their flirtatious relationship. Whispered rumors spread quickly between the five other employees, and even the supervisor wasn't left out of the backroom talk. The gossip was juicy and the newest thing to talk about while they passed the boring hours between customers. They talked actively behind her back and at the same time added to the rumors with their own insights and conclusions. Not a single soul thought to intervene to save this young, naive woman's marriage. Yet why should they? Kitty shot down every suggestion that something was going on between the two, and would still deny it anyway. In this aspect, it was better to play the part of sightless observer than overzealous friend. All of the employees had become friends in the small confined area of the fast food joint, not in the sense that they all hung out after work, but more along the lines that they did care for one another. The concern and kindness was always there, and there was always an ear willing to listen to the day's problems. Knowing all that, how was it that they allowed something like this to happen? The simple answer is usually the correct answer. They didn't care. The gossip and juicy tales were more than enough to fill their minds with a need for more. It has always baffled me as to how the human race could show an immeasurable amount of love and kindness to a fellow human being, but turn a blind eye to that same person's actions as soon as they become something that they don't agree with. There is no sense of equality among humans, a sense of moral justice or even moral righteousness. Humans welcome the damaged and sickly to infect their worlds with ignorance and deceit. I believe the saying is, Ignorance is bliss. Kathleen was, more or less, ignorant to her actions when it concerned James. Her justification was simple and completely off base, as I have stated before. She didn't see anything wrong with her affections towards the young mechanic because they were purely platonic. It was perfectly normal for her to care about her new friend in the way she did, talk to him for hours late at night while Mitch slept, even going to the movies with him or having long, drawn out conversations in the mechanic's truck. To Kathleen, these were all normal, but everyone around her could see otherwise. The crew knew she fancied James. Even James knew that Kitty had more than friendly feelings towards him, yet he was more than willing to let her set the pace of their budding relationship. So, James smirked after a rambunctious round of flirting. So, Kathleen answered, trying to edge James to continue on further. What are you doing late at night? There it was, as plain as the nose on her face. James had just formally asked her out on a date. Her cheeks turned a bright crimson and she smiled at him. In her mind, the thoughts of what she was really supposed to do that night raced over and over. She was supposed to spend time with Mitch and Riley and watch a movie or do something else family oriented. But the weight behind the proposition she had just received made her think twice and think fast. It was something she just couldn't pass up. Nothing I can't get out of, her eyes brightened. Why? She asked with all the hope in the world behind her smile. Subconsciously, her thumb began to slowly trace over her wedding band, and a small sliver of regret shot through her mind. The fact that she was actively trying to think of what she would tell Mitch to get out of going home made her realize exactly what she was embarking on. Kitty wasn't so sure as to how she would feel at this point. Her excitement towards going out with James on a real date was something she had been secretly craving since the two had met. Then there was Mitch and her feelings towards him and all they had been through. On the one hand, she had her daughter and her husband, who she loved very much, but on the other hand, she had this young and exciting mechanic that made her feel more alive in the last few weeks than her husband had since they had gotten married. The young mechanic wanted her, and she had to admit that she wanted him just as much. Well, I was hoping we could catch a movie or go out to dinner or something, James smirked. A second twinge of regret shot through Kitty. She wanted to jump up and shout, "Yes!" over and over, but couldn't. Something was stopping her. Can, she paused as she bit her bottom lip, can I give you an answer after work? James smiled and nodded and then turned to go back to work. A devil's advocate is what Kathleen needed at this very moment. Someone to show her both sides of the coin and expose her inner thoughts. To let her get everything out. This is exactly what I planned on giving her. I had witnessed the whole exchange and every one previous that I won't bore you with. Kitty wanted someone to push her in either direction since she couldn't quite make up her mind. After I had set my food in the trash, I decided that there was no time like the present to give the young woman the advice she thought she needed. I couldn't stop the inevitable, but the funny thing about fate is that you may be destined to do something or act a certain way, but you still have a choice that you can make to change the outcome. Lo-Fi, are you pushing your mug? You seem troubled, I said with a smile as I approached the counter. I must have startled her out of some pretty deep and lurid thoughts, because when she looked up at me, her face resembled that of a beet. Oh, Mr. Graymore, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry, is there anything else I can get you? She smiled. It wasn't flirtatious or even polite, it just seemed to be a smile. I'm fine, thank you. I was just curious as to what a lovely woman like such as yourself has to be worried about. Kathleen looked at me as if I had just walked over her grave. I think I was just asked out on a date. Her voice carried a trace of forced amazement, but with an equal amount of pride. But aren't you married? I could see the color drain from her soft features as her thoughts seemed to have mirrored my own question. Well, yeah, but it's still nice to be asked. I mean, it's always nice to know that I'm still attractive. She gave a quick nod and then busied herself with the menial tasks of restocking the cups. If she thought she was fooling anyone by her response, she was sadly mistaken. I happened to glance at the cook on duty and saw him roll his eyes, which confirmed my assumption. A response like that was normally reserved for a married woman in their 40s that had had 3 children, not 22-year-old girls in the prime of their lives. All I know is that I wish a woman would look at me the same way you look at that young mechanic. Come on now, Mr. Graymore. You know you look good to me, Kitty said with an honest smile. Well, I do what I can, I guess. If that was me, I wouldn't stop until I at least got to speak to you privately. I mean, the way you two carry on makes people wonder, you know. As I walked away, I was more than certain that Kitty would be going out with James tonight, even if it was only to talk. Whether it was the tone of her voice or the fact that while we had our little talk, Kathleen couldn't stop blushing. The primitive brain is one of the easiest parts to read on a human, and her primitive brain was working in overdrive. Instincts to find the most potent and virile male to provide had added to her lust for James, and if they were going to talk, it would be more than likely after a long makeout session. Now, I would love to tell you exactly what happened that night, but seeing that I wasn't there, I'll just leave it up to your own imagination. What I can tell you is that Kathleen was all smiles the next day. She had a glow about her that all women get when they are either pregnant or sexually satisfied. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to what happened after she got her off her shift the day before. It wasn't long before James made his presence known. The door swung open, and the young man walked in his usual swagger, only this time there was an air of confidence surrounding him. The two looked at each other, and the girlish giggle that came from Kathleen's lips made it quite obvious that she didn't get home until late last night. Hey, Trouble, Kitty said as soon as James had fully entered the dining area. James didn't say anything as he walked up to the counter. In fact, he didn't say anything until he was close enough to whisper into Kitty's ear. He leaned forward, and she instantly began to giggle like a schoolgirl hearing a dirty word for the first time. His confidence wasn't unwarranted. He had gotten something that no one else had even gotten close to getting. James had Kitty's undivided attention. Yeah, I agree. Last night was really fun, she cheerily said loud enough to be heard by everyone else in the restaurant. James stepped back and nodded. He didn't have to say anything. He already knew that he would get her to go out with him again any time he wanted, regardless of if her husband or family. He had her right where he wanted her. The young mechanic was quite good at his seduction. His silence made Kathleen admit everything or initiate the next move and giving nothing in return. In essence, he was making her responsible for anything they and everything they had done or were going to do. It was the most fun I had in a long time. I'd like to do it again sometime. James gave a silent nod and added a wink for effect. It was subtle, but I saw it. This type of exchange went on for over a week before Kathleen and James went out again. The rumors were no longer rumors, and the fact that her co-workers seemed to know what was going on only made Kitty more comfortable with acting affectionately towards James. She let the subtlety drop from her words and her actions, and let all pretenses that this was a friendship vanish along with her modesty. The only time that the friendship was upheld was when Mitch came around. Kathleen would avidly confess that her and James' friendship was just that, and that and they knew whether they should. Sorry, and just that, and there was only a platonic kinship between the two of them. No one that worked there knew whether they should tell Mitch or keep their mouths shut. They didn't know if it was their place to say, or if they should try and talk Kathleen into telling Mitch. Whilst her husband was away, the flirtation got hotter than just simple comments and hugs. James' hands would find themselves in all sorts of places on Kitty's body that they should definitely not be. The verbal teasing got worse as well. It moved from tame, don't his arms look so good in that shirt, to the more graphic, you should see what he has under those coveralls. Makes me melt just thinking about it. Everyone knew by the second time they had officially gone out that Kathleen was having a full-blown affair. I won't bore you with more details of progressing courtship, but I can tell you that things moved extremely fast. Kitty would kiss her husband softly, and quickly after, softly and quickly after they had lunch together. But when James came in after Mitch had left, she greeted him with what one could describe as a soul kiss. It was deep, passionate, and heated. About a month after they had started their torrid affair, things took a drastic turn. James had come in on his lunch like he had been doing for the last couple of weeks. Kitty immediately went on her break as well. It wasn't too strange for her to do this. They disappeared this time and couldn't have happened at a worse time. The two had been gone for quite some time when a rush hit. This was very rare for the fact that a tour bus had broken down just a block away. The passengers all swarmed the burger place and packed like a pack of starved wolves, and the remaining cashier was swamped. The cook that was there handled it with skill, and the cashier took everything with a smile. Even though she handled the rush with finesse, she was justifiably upset that Kathleen had vanished. After everything had settled down and all the garbage and food had been taken care of, the cook and the second cashier realized that Kitty still hadn't returned. A loud crash from somewhere in the back caused the cook to look around the walk-in refrigerator's area. Hearing muffled sounds coming from within, the cook found where Kitty and James had vanished to. The two coworkers crept up to the walk-in and looked at each other before the cook grabbed the handle. They were pretty sure of what they would find, but weren't sure if they really wanted to see it or not. As the cook stepped forward to open the door, a loud groan echoed, and something else crashed to the floor within the refrigerator. Laughing nervously, he gripped the handle firmly and gave a hard tug. The latch popped free and bathed the walk-in with fluorescent light, clearly exposing the two lovers entwined. The two coworkers drank in the sight in front of them as if they were a starving dog. The groans only got louder as soon as the door was ajar. With the act of the two vice-riddled sinners exposed, Kathleen's eyes widened in a mixture of fear and excitement. Her small frame was being pressed continually against the back of the wall of the refrigeration unit, her bare legs wrapped tightly around James's waist. Even though she had been caught, the young woman had no intention of stopping. Her hands gripped harshly at the mechanic's broad shoulders as he pushed against her again, pulling yet another lewd moan from her. James continued to speed towards his goal, not caring that someone had opened the walk-in. His bare cheeks could be seen peeking out from under his shirt as his pants piled up around his feet. One of his hands was gripping Kathleen's bare waist as the other was obstructed from view by his body. I'm glad you liked that line. But the angle suggested that he had cupped her breast and was manipulating it enough to cause another groan from Kitty's mouth. Kathleen's body was all but hidden from her coworkers, but her panties hung loosely around one of her ankles with the rest of her clothes cast about within the small space. The only thing that seemed to be protecting her bare skin from the chill of the cold was the small sports bra that had been pushed up over her bosom to rest just under her neck. The expression of pained ecstasy on her face never left as she looked right into her friend's eyes. When the fact registered that they had been caught, her moans stopped, and her face dropped into a mixture of shock, fear, and embarrassment. Her hands loosened their death grip from James's shoulders and began to push feebly away. The act had not gone too far, though. James was at his peak, and his thrusting moving even harder against Kathleen's small frame. Each slap of flesh caused her whole body to shake as the culmination was quickly washing away any form of embarrassment she had been feeling. Her eyelids flickered as her eyes rolled back, and her hands quickly wrapped around James's back, and her nails dug hard into his clothes. Both of the lovers called out their respective climaxes and then slowly slipped into a tangled mass on the walk-in floor. Kitty, red as a tomato, go James. Kitty, red as a tomato, quickly dismounted James and pulled her close to cover herself up. James mumbled something no one could quite understand and casually pulled his pants back up to his waist. He looked down at Kathleen and shrugged and then exited the refrigerator. Kathleen was left on the floor with the evidence of her illicit affair pooling beneath her, with her dignity flowing out along with it. She quietly got dressed and walked slowly out of the walk-in. She didn't say a word as she took her time card out and pursed of her purse and swiped it to leave. She looked at her friends and co-workers pleadingly and asked softly if they wouldn't tell anyone what they saw. With secrecy and discretion, Kathleen went home. To their credit, the cashier and the cook held their tongues for a good 2 hours. By the time the second and night cashier had arrived, they had let the floodgates open, an hour after the supervisor had found out. A day later, the affair had been made public to the surrounding businesses and anyone else who had wanted to know. The end result of the tryst in the walk-in was, of course, Kathleen losing her job. She was fired the next time she came into work, and after a heart-wrenching breakdown in the middle of the dining area, she finally went home. James, in an act of self-preservation, stopped coming to the burger joint at all and even cut all communication with Kathleen. The numerous calls, letters, and text messages were unceremoniously ignored, and he got back to living his life. The whole thing would have blown over for Kathleen if she didn't have to explain to Mitch why she didn't have a job anymore. She tried to lie, saying it was the fact that she had been rude to a customer and the like, but when pushed and tried to get her job back... give me just a second, guys. All right, where was I? Sorry, had to let someone in. James, in an act of self-preservation, stopped. No, I said that. Numerous calls, letters, blah, blah, blah. Went back to living his life. The whole thing would have blown over for Kathleen. She didn't have to explain to Mitch why she didn't have a job anymore. She tried to lie, saying it was the fact that she had been rude to a customer and the like. But when pushed to try and get her job back, she finally broke down and told him the real reason. Mitch was by no means okay with what had happened. In fact, his heart was broken in two. He had been betrayed by the woman he had given himself fully to. He didn't know what to think or do, and for weeks he refused to talk to her. I wish I could tell you that the young husband and wife worked things out and are even stronger in their relationship because of the incident. But that would be a bold-faced lie, and I make a habit to tell the truth as much as I can. Mitch had been cuckolded by Kathleen, and in the most aggressive way possible. After weeks of silence, Kathleen came home from her newest job hoping to talk to Mitch and try to patch things up. It was 2 days before their 2-year anniversary. She was hoping they would be able to communicate. Once she opened the door, though, she realized it was an impossibility. The apartment was completely empty except for her things. They were all piled up nicely in the middle of the living room floor with a small white piece of paper on them. She ran from the doorway to their bedroom only to see all of Mitch's clothes and personal effects gone. Her next stop was Riley's room, and everything was gone. Her husband and daughter had left while she was out. Kathleen stumbled back into the living room, picked up the small piece of paper with tears streaming down her cheeks, and began to read it. It wasn't lengthy, the note. It was rather simple and straightforward. I can't bring myself to look at you, touch you, or trust you anymore, so I won't. I've taken Riley. Goodbye. Signed, Mitch. Her knees weakened and slipped out from under her, and Kathleen went crashing to the floor. Her entire body was racked with heavy sobs as she clutched the note as if it was her very soul. Her husband and her daughter were gone. She had lost a job that she enjoyed, and her dignity was completely gone. Her entire livelihood was gone, and now she was left with nothing. James wouldn't even acknowledge that she existed and seemed to have moved on to a new girl soon after they had been caught. A hard lesson had been learned by Kathleen Degas. Her education had been complete, and the outcome was one that I had engineered. You see, this was a story about the former Mrs. Degas and not James. I forgot to mention the words that I played the devil's advocate, and that it is exactly what I had done here. I only had one small chore left after the life of this young woman had been obliterated. I approached Kathleen shortly after her meltdown and offered her a comforting shoulder to cry on, and even offered her a willing ear to listen. But my true motives needed to be explained, and it is something I always do before I completed the Chosen's education. I exposed myself to what I am, and even told her why I did it. Will I tell you? I doubt it. But once again, if I decide to tell your story, You can feel free to expose me for what I am. With the thoughts of with the thoughts of revealing her guilt. Sorry. With the thoughts of revealing her guilt, Kathleen welcomed my final education. One final lesson that would help her be rid of all the pain she felt in her heart for her own choices. It was small and smooth. One small pill that would place her into sleep she would never wake from. She willingly took it and eagerly swallowed. As I laid her comatose body on her empty bed, I wondered just what was going on in her mind. Something of a quirk of mine, I guess. But I digress. I left her there to be found a week later, very dead. The police ruled it a suicide. But we know better. I said before, even if you are fated to do something, or be someone, you as a human being still have to ultimately make the choice. This story is like so many others who made the wrong choice. I'm not evil by any standard, but I do consider myself the downfall of hundreds, if not thousands, of you humans. I am but a humble messenger, and I hope to be seeing you all very soon. The end. Thank you, Tracy. I had plans of continuing it and have it be a whole slew of different stories from the same character about people's lives that he was going to be interacting with. I started writing a second story, but it didn't turn out how I wanted it. I could probably go back and rewrite it, but I really haven't had time. And then they all died. You had hopes. Hi, Buzz. You had hopes for her to be a pole dancer. I know I should. If my schedule changes the way I think it's going to change, I will have time to do the stuff that I want to do as well as still doing YouTube. So there is a possibility I can get back into writing. But you guys talk amongst yourselves. I will be right back. I have to go do something really quickly for my job, whether you like me to leave or not. So hold on. And I'm back. No, King, you only missed one story. James, you bring up a very good point. Um, Brockis has actually written kind of a. It's not my job to oil the hinges on the damn door. Um, Brockis has come up with kind of a backstory for Antwon. When he gives me more of a description, I'm actually thinking of writing something about it, and possibly including the other villains as well. No. The inches are my co-host. Yes, Brockus can write. Um, I was actually kind of working over it in my head on my way to work tonight because he gave me a brief description. Here, I'll bring it up. Um, let me find it. There. Okay. So this is what he gave me. He's going to do a quick version, long version. This is the quick version. In 1990, the internet was beginning to get bigger and bigger, but in 1995, the internet began to give birth to an entity that couldn't control. And in the summer of 1997, a dark energy child came into our world, growing more each year. Because of the trolls and the vile commenters online, in 2016, because all he says is the year that Antwon took over help for the guild list. The entity made himself known and recruited 3 others like-minded people to make a change on the current insanity online. Thus, the proper villains were born. I'm sure they'll never squeak again if you use anal lube. But that's the um, kind of like a dark energy demon. Now, originally, Antwon was a halfling. He was based on the character I played on him of him on in D&D. The voice is actually the character's voice that I used. But he said that when my avatar changed, he saw more and more that this was this demon that had been born from this energy being that had been born from the internet, all the darkness and anger from the internet that's dealing with the insanity. And I thought it was really an amazing um, story. And with all the stuff that we talked to Magog about on Tuesday, his story actually makes a lot of sense if we're going to have the proper villains take place in a world that's kind of like an alternate reality cyberpunk version of our world. He was born, and actually the story, I'm getting an idea that I'm going to make Lo-Fi his actual creator. She doesn't know that she created him, but he's actually she actually kind of caused him to be born. Yes, like Shadowrun. Both, yeah, Shadowrun or Netrun or something like that. So um I don't know if you guys have followed us all on thank you, James. um I don't know if you guys follow us all the villains on Twitter, but we've already all changed our avatars to look like what Magog has designed and given us the idea to kind of stick together. I am forever in his debt for the advice, the priceless advice that he had given us. So, and he's already done so much. So I'm looking forward to a lot of this. Yes, and that's kind of what happened. Now, a while ago, I was using some channel art that one of Brockus's friends designed, and he kind of had this magical ability, like magic pulsing from his eyes. And then I was searching for a channel banner, and I found the profile pic that I have, and I went with it. But what I'm going to be doing, well, as he put it, as Magog put it, when he was a smaller channel, bigger channels helped him, so he wants to do the same thing, and he really likes what the idea that we have going. Um, Actually, I can show you what the original Antwon looked like. I have to find him though. Give me a second. Um, or is he just... Okay, so he's just in the picture. Where is it? There it is. There we go. Nope, not that folder. Um, Everybody wants a wrench. Just because you want a wrench doesn't mean you get a wrench. All right. So, okay. That is what Antwon originally looked like. He's a halfling rogue. So I hope you guys can you guys see that? No, you can't time Moondoggy out. So that's what he originally was. Um, and then this is what it's not going to come out too well, but this is what channel art was. So kind of started taking on a magical quality.